Ever call like a cutthroat CEO a shark? Or maybe you've felt a weird sort of kinship with your dog while watching them chase squirrels?
Yeah.
These might seem like everyday things.
Right.
But Michel Serres would argue they're echoes of ancient ways of thinking,
Yeah.
still shaping how we see the world today. Get ready to dive into that kind of deep dive.
Okay.
Because your deep dive today is all about Serres.
And the material you've given us excerpts from Ecrivains, savants et philosophes font le tour du monde is the perfect launchpad for this journey. We're talking about those big, fascinating questions Serres grapples with. How we acquire knowledge, how we perceive the world, and how these things connect us to nature more than we realize.
Okay, so Ecrivains, savants et philosophes font le tour du monde.
Right.
Even the title sounds like a trip around the world of knowledge.
Yeah.
But where do we even begin unpacking Serres' ideas?
Yeah.
He weaves together so many different threads, myths, personal stories, scientific breakthroughs.
Yeah.
It's like he's creating this intricate tapestry of knowledge.
It's true. Serres doesn't shy away from complexity, but there's a method to his madness. One of his central arguments is that true understanding requires not one, but 3 impossible journeys. And they're journeys you're probably already on, in a way.
3 impossible journeys.
Yeah.
All right, you've got my attention. Tell me more.
First, there's the journey around the world itself. Think about the vastness of different cultures, landscapes, ways of life. To truly get the world, you'd have to experience it all, which is, of course, impossible.
Okay.
Then there's the journey around knowledge. You've dipped your toes into philosophy, you've got excerpts from Serres, but imagine trying to grasp the full scope of human knowledge, from art to astrophysics. Another impossibility.
Okay, 2 impossible journeys down. 1 to go.
Yeah.
What's the third? And how does Serres even begin to tackle these massive concepts?
The third journey, and this one's the trickiest, is the journey around narratives. It's about questioning the stories we tell ourselves, the frameworks we use to understand the world. Serres believed that to truly grasp knowledge, you have to constantly be challenging your own assumptions. He encourages us to break down traditional boundaries between disciplines, to see knowledge not as a bunch of separate islands, but as an interconnected archipelago.
So instead of neatly dividing knowledge into categories like philosophy or biology,
Right.
Serres wants us to see the connections, the overlaps, the ways one field informs another.
Right.
Exactly. He challenges that hard line we often draw between nature and culture.
Precisely. He argues that even our most objective scientific frameworks are often rooted in a much deeper connection to the natural world than we might think. He uses his own upbringing as a great example.
Oh, tell me about that. I always find it fascinating how someone's personal history influences their philosophical ideas.
Well, Serres grew up in rural France,
Okay.
and he often talks about his experiences swimming in the Garonne River. He describes feeling the water not just as this physical substance, but as a living entity.
Wow.
He also talks about tending to farm animals, each with its own distinct personality, further blurring that line between how we perceive sentience in humans versus the natural world.
So he's not just pulling these ideas about interconnectedness out of thin air.
No.
They're rooted in these vivid personal experiences from his childhood.
Exactly. And this leads us to some of the key concepts in Serres' work: totemism, animism, and analogism. He sees these ancient ways of thinking not as outdated relics, but as modes of thought that still shape our language, our scientific discoveries, even how we understand the universe as this vast web of information.
All right, let's break down these big concepts.
Okay.
What do they actually mean, and how do they play into Serres' argument?
Let's start with totemism.
Okay.
Think about that example you gave earlier, calling a CEO a shark. Serres builds on the work of anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss, who argued that indigenous cultures use totems, often animals or plants, to understand relationships and create distinctions between groups.
So it's not just about worshiping a specific animal.
Right.
It's about using those totems to understand our place within the natural order, right?
Yes. And Serres takes this idea further. He argues that we still engage in totemic thinking, even if we're not aware of it. When we call someone a shark in the business world or a lone wolf, we're drawing on those animal totems to express human qualities.
That's such a cool point.
Yeah.
We do this all the time without even realizing it.
Yeah.
It's like when we say someone is sickly as a fox or busy as a bee, it's like we're tapping into this ancient system of understanding.
Precisely. And animism, that idea that everything possesses a spirit or soul, goes hand in hand with this. When we view the world through an animistic lens, we acknowledge this interconnectedness of all things. It's not just that humans possess a unique energy or spirit, but that the entire universe is infused with it.
It reminds me of those ancient myths and creation stories that cultures around the world have used to explain natural phenomena. The stories about constellations or how the world began. There's this sense of awe and wonder, this recognition that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that Serres argues that modern science, especially information theory, might be leading us back to this animistic perspective.
Okay, now that's what I call a deep dive.
Yeah.
How does he connect information theory to animism?
Well, information theory suggests that information is fundamental to the universe, maybe even more than matter or energy.
Okay.
And this idea resonates with the animistic perspective, which sees the universe as alive, vibrant, and filled with this kind of universal energy or spirit.
So in a way, we're coming full circle.
Yeah.
Ancient cultures saw the world as interconnected, alive with this energy and spirit.
Right.
Then we went through a period of separating ourselves from nature, viewing it as mechanistic and inert.
Right.
And now modern science, with its focus on information and interconnected systems, might just be leading us back to that ancient wisdom, even if it's in a new form. It's almost as if science is rediscovering what ancient cultures knew all along.
It's a fascinating idea, right?
Yeah.
And it's through that third key concept, analogism, that Serres brings this all together.
Okay.
He believes analogism is more than just drawing simple comparisons. For him, it's a fundamental way of understanding the universe. It's about recognizing patterns, making those connections between seemingly unrelated things, those aha moments that lead to deeper understanding.
It's like finding unity in diversity.
Yeah.
Seeing how everything is ultimately interconnected through this vast, intricate web of relationships.
Exactly. And to really drive this home, he turns to one of his favorite examples, La Fontaine's fables.
Wait, those classic fables we all read as kids?
Yeah.
What could those possibly have to do with all of this?
You might be surprised. That's what makes Serres so brilliant. He sees these layers of meaning that most people miss.
Okay.
He analyzes fables like The Wolf and the Lamb and The Wolf and the Dog to show how these simple stories actually reveal much deeper truths.
Okay, now I need to hear this.
Okay.
I'm hooked.
All right.
How does he connect, say, The Wolf and the Lamb to his bigger arguments about knowledge, nature, and culture?
Think about it. It's a story about power, about the predator justifying its actions.
Right.
But what Serres sees in this fable is a reflection of how humans have often approached our relationship with nature.
Okay.
We often view ourselves as superior,
Right.
justified in exploiting the natural world for our needs.
So the wolf isn't just a wolf.
Right.
It becomes this symbol of humanity's relationship with the natural world.
Exactly.
It's about those underlying power dynamics and our tendency to justify our actions, even when they might be harmful or exploitative.
Precisely. And then there's The Wolf and the Dog, which explores a different aspect of this relationship, the compromises we make for security and comfort.
It's amazing how he finds these layers of meaning in these seemingly simple stories.
Yeah.
It's making me rethink those fables completely. But I have a feeling we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
There's so much more to uncover.
You're absolutely right. We haven't even touched upon his ideas about the catholicity of knowledge or the emergence of a generic culture.
Right.
That's where things get even more interesting.
Well, I guess we'll have to save those fascinating insights for part 2 of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere, because we're about to go even deeper into the mind of Michel Serres. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
You ready to keep exploring the fascinating and sometimes mind-bending world of Michel Serres?
Absolutely. Last time we were talking about how Serres sees these ancient ways of thinking, totemism, animism, analogism, not as outdated ideas, but as threads woven into the very fabric of how we understand the world. But his exploration doesn't stop there.
Right. You mentioned we'd be unpacking a couple more of his key concepts. Catholicity of knowledge and a generic culture. Those sound intriguing, and I'm ready to dive in.
Well, let's start with Catholicity.
Okay.
And before you picture stained glass and Gregorian chants,
Right.
Serres is using this term in its original sense, meaning universal.
Okay.
So we're not talking about religious dogma here.
Well,
not at all. He's actually pushing against any kind of rigid thinking.
Okay.
Serres believes true knowledge can't be limited by any single worldview or discipline. It's about embracing a diversity of perspectives.
Okay.
Recognizing that all these different ways of knowing can contribute to a more complete understanding.
It's like that new archipelago metaphor we talked about earlier.
Right.
Where different fields of knowledge are interconnected.
Yeah.
He's saying it's not about picking one right way of knowing, but recognizing the value in multiple perspectives.
Exactly. Serres would say that boxing ourselves into one way of thinking,
Right.
whether it's pure logic or scientific observation, ultimately limits our understanding.
I'm reminded of that anecdote Serres mentions about the naturalist who was stumped by a rare specimen.
Right.
It took someone like Linnaeus,
Yeah.
coming all the way from Stockholm,
Yeah.
to recognize it both by its local and scientific names.
Right.
That really highlights the power of combining different forms of knowledge, local, experiential, and scientific.
That's a perfect example. Serres would argue that both the naturalist's expertise and Linnaeus's broader knowledge were essential for fully understanding that specimen. It's about recognizing what each perspective brings to the table.
So it's not a competition.
Right.
It's a collaboration.
Yeah.
Kind of like that saying two heads are better than one.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's more like multiple perspectives are better than one.
Right. Precisely. And this emphasis on diverse perspectives directly connects to Serres' concept of a generic culture,
Okay.
which he sees emerging in our increasingly interconnected world. Think about it. Globalization, technology,
Yeah.
the sheer volume of information we have access to, it's blurring those traditional lines between cultures and disciplines,
Right.
leading to new forms of knowledge and understanding.
It's like the internet is creating this global melting pot of ideas and perspectives. Is
Yeah.
that what he's getting at with generic culture?
In a sense, yes. Serres sees this generic culture as both a challenge and an opportunity.
Yeah.
It challenges us to reconsider our assumptions, to engage with different ways of knowing,
Yeah.
to find common ground across those cultural divides that have often kept us apart.
It makes you wonder if this new level of interconnectedness could help us move beyond some of those old, tired debates. Science versus religion, nature versus culture, objective versus subjective truth.
Right.
Is that part of what Serres is suggesting?
It's certainly a possibility. He was optimistic about the potential of this generic culture to foster greater understanding and cooperation.
Okay.
His belief was that as we become more aware of the interconnectedness of all things,
Right.
we'll be less likely to cling to rigid worldviews.
That's a hopeful thought. But how does this generic culture actually play out in the real world?
Right.
What are some concrete examples of this shift taking place?
Well, look at how scientific research is conducted today. It's often a global effort, with scientists from all over the world, from different disciplines and backgrounds, working together.
Right.
That cross-pollination of ideas is leading to new discoveries and solutions to global challenges.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
We're seeing more and more international research teams coming together to tackle issues like climate change,
Right.
disease outbreaks, and advancing technology. It's like a global brain trust, pooling all of that collective wisdom and expertise.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Serres would argue that this is just the tip of the iceberg. As technology continues to advance and our world becomes even more interconnected, this generic culture will keep evolving,
Right.
creating new possibilities for knowledge, for understanding, even for human connection.
It's an exciting
Yeah.
and honestly a slightly daunting idea, this emergence of a global interconnected culture.
Yeah.
But I can see how it has the potential to lead to some really positive outcomes.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of being open to different perspectives,
Right.
to challenging our own assumptions,
Yeah.
and recognizing that shared humanity that ultimately connects us all.
And this brings us back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
Serres' emphasis on the power of narratives, of stories, in shaping our understanding of the world. He argued that the stories we tell ourselves,
Right.
whether they're personal anecdotes or historical accounts
Yeah.
or even scientific theories,
Right.
profoundly influence how we perceive reality and our own place within it.
One of the things I appreciate most about Serres' work is how he weaves together all these different threads.
Yeah.
He's not just interested in presenting these dry, abstract concepts. He's constantly pulling from personal experiences, literary examples,
Right.
historical anecdotes, even scientific discoveries to illustrate his points.
Right.
It makes his work so much more engaging and relatable.
Exactly. Serres understood that knowledge isn't just about accumulating facts or mastering theories. It's about making those connections, finding the meaning,
Yeah.
and ultimately telling a story that helps us make sense of it all.
So it's not enough to just know something.
Right.
We have to be able to connect this to our own lives and experiences.
Precisely. And this is where Serres saw the humanities and the sciences coming together. He believes science can provide us with the facts, the data,
Right.
the objective observations, but it's the humanities that help us interpret that data, find the meaning in it, connect it back to the bigger human story.
He's highlighting the bridge between the hard and the soft sciences,
Right.
two fields that are often seen as being at odds with each other,
Yeah.
but which he believes are essential for true knowledge.
Exactly. He challenges that artificial divide,
Right.
arguing that both are critical for gaining wisdom. But we're running short on time,
Right.
and there's one more crucial element of Serres' thought that we need to explore.
Well, it sounds like we're heading into the final act of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, listeners, because things are about to get really interesting. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here for the final part of our exploration into the mind of Michel Serres, and I have to say, my brain is feeling all sorts of connected right now.
That's a good sign. It means Serres' ideas are starting to work their magic.
I think you're right. We've been talking about how Serres views totemism, animism, analogism, those ancient ways of thinking as still relevant to our modern world.
Yeah.
And we've explored his concepts of Catholicity and generic culture. But I feel like there's this bigger picture we haven't fully stepped into yet.
You're picking up on something crucial there, because underlying all of these ideas is a fundamental question that Serres poses. What if the universe isn't really about rigid laws,
Okay.
but about relationships?
Okay, now that is a mind bender.
Right.
So instead of seeing the universe as this perfectly calibrated machine,
Right.
Serres wants us to see it as this messy, interconnected web
Yeah.
where everything is in constant dialogue with everything else.
Precisely. He challenges that traditional mechanistic view of the universe that really emerged from the scientific revolution. Instead of fixating on isolated objects and their properties, Serres wants us to zoom in on those spaces between, on the relationships that bind everything together.
It's making me think about those fables again. The wolf and the lamb, the wolf and the dog.
Right.
They're connected by this invisible thread of predator and prey,
Yeah.
of power dynamics. The story isn't just about the individual animals, but
Yeah.
about the space they share, the tension that exists between them.
Exactly. And Serres takes this idea even further, proposing that adopting a relational worldview can revolutionize how we approach everything from science and knowledge to our everyday interactions.
So how does this shift in perspective, this move towards a relational worldview, actually change things?
Right.
How do we put it into practice?
Well, it starts by moving beyond those rigid, binary ways of thinking. Instead of those classic standoffs, nature versus culture, science versus religion, objective versus subjective,
Right.
we start to see a more nuanced, interconnected reality.
It's like we're breaking free from those either boxes
Yeah.
and embracing the both hand.
Yeah.
Recognizing that what we thought were opposing forces can actually coexist and complement each other.
Exactly. It's about understanding that reality is complex,
Right.
messy, full of contradictions. And it's embracing those contradictions that we arrive at a more complete, more interesting understanding.
It makes me think about Catholicity. Again, that idea of embracing multiple valid ways of knowing.
Right.
It's not about picking sides.
Right.
But about bringing those diverse perspectives into conversation with each other.
You've got it. And Serres believes that this relational approach has incredible potential to shape a wide range of fields, from science and technology to ethics and politics.
Give me an example. How would seeing the world through this lens change how we approach, say, scientific research?
It encourages us to look beyond reductionist approaches,
Okay.
which often break things down into their smallest parts.
Right.
Instead, we start to consider the complex interplay between different systems, how those individual pieces fit into the larger web.
It's like instead of just looking at individual trees,
Right.
we start to consider the whole forest, the ecosystem they're a part of.
Exactly. And that can lead to breakthroughs that a more isolated approach might miss.
I can see how this ties into everything we've been discussing. It's about interconnectedness, about embracing complexity, about looking for those relationships that might not be immediately obvious.
Precisely. And it's not just about understanding the world around us, but about recognizing our own place in that web of relationships. It's a call to think about our responsibility to each other, to the planet, to the systems that support life.
It's both humbling and empowering at the same time, isn't it? To recognize that we're just one part of this vast, complex system, but that our actions
Yeah.
however small,
Right.
have an impact on the whole.
It's a perspective that can be challenging, but ultimately, I think, incredibly hopeful.
I agree. Serres leaves us with this powerful image. The real shows more relational than rational. It's a call to reconsider how we approach science, knowledge, even our everyday lives.
It's about being open to the unexpected, to the connections that we might not have otherwise seen. It's about understanding that the universe is a conversation, not a monologue.
And then on that note, dear listeners, we'll leave you to continue the conversation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the intriguing world of Michel Serres. We hope it sparked some new connections in your own thinking.